Whether you are a seasoned horror fan or completely new to the genre, there is no way you do not know about Leatherface, the iconic and menacing villain from Tobe Hooper's classic horror movie, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Leatherface is a man of a few words, but his presence on the screen is so menacing, so iconic that it is hard not to feel a chill running down your spine whenever you see him. In today's video, we will look into the myth of Leatherface and compare it with reality to explore if he was inspired by a real person or if he was a grotesque product of Tobe Hooper's creativity. So grab your comfort blanket as we embark on this bone-chilling journey. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. Who is the Leatherface? Before we get into the nitty-gritty and find out if there is a real killer or not, we need to first talk about our boy, Jedediah Sawyer. Throughout the entire series, Jedediah is known as Leatherface because he wears a mask made of human flesh. Wielding his weapon of choice, a chainsaw, and wearing the bloodied apron, Leatherface is extremely scary to look at. From the get-go, you can see that he is not malicious in his own volition. He is ordered by his family members to do their bidding, and that's what leads to him committing the murders. Just like the other iconic slasher villains like Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, Leatherface is also played by several actors in the franchise. However, for me, Gunnar Hansen's portrayal of Leatherface in the first movie will always remain iconic. Over the course of the films, while Leatherface's personality and looks change quite a bit, the one thing that remains common in all the portrayals, except the 2017 film, is his lack of words. The man just moves around menacingly, sometimes making noises, but not at all many words. In the original film, Jedediah had 4 family members: Grandpa, Chop Top, Drayton Sawyer, and Nubbins. This too changes as you go down the franchise and the continuity of the series gets further complicated. Throughout all of the films, it is very evident that Leatherface is not someone who can be killed. Not that he is immortal or something, he is just very resilient like most villains are. The only time we see him die on screen is in part 2, where Drayton drops a bomb to kill an attacking lefty but ends up taking down Leatherface and Grandpa with him. In the first film, we follow Sally Hardesty and her brother Franklin, who decide to travel to rural Texas where their grandfather is buried after learning that several grave sites were desecrated and the bodies were taken out. With them, 3 of their friends decided to tag along. They were Jerry, Pam, and Kirk. Pam and Kirk are a couple, and Jerry was Sally's boo. Luckily, the gravesite was not desecrated, and with that sigh of relief, the youngsters decided that since they were in the locality, they might as well visit Sally's old home. On their way to the homestead, they pick up a weird hitchhiker, helping him out despite all his weird antics. The hitchhiker asks the group to come visit his house for dinner, but when they refuse, the guy clicks a picture of Franklin and asks for $2 in return. Obviously, no one paid up, and the man got angry. He crumpled up the photo, burnt it, and then for some reason cut his hand with Franklin's pocket knife. Seeing that this guy is definitely not good news, the group throws the guy out of the van, but not before the guy cuts Franklin as well. After checking off the mandatory horror trope of dropping by a decrepit gas station or store and getting some age-old vague exposition, the group reaches the abandoned house, and this is where things end up going south. On checking out the sound of a gas generator nearby, the group discovers a large farmhouse just littered with abandoned vehicles around it. On the porch, Kirk finds a human tooth, and like a fool, he decides to enter the house to check out some strange animal noises. And this is when we meet the star of our video, Leatherface. Walking into the frame with his bloodied apron, leather mask, and a giant sledgehammer, Leatherface smashes through Kirk, giving us the most memorable villain entrance from the 1970s. After that, as you can guess, one by one, they all fall victim to Leatherface and his family. Pam quickly joins her boyfriend in the afterlife when Leatherface catches her after she enters the room. While everyone is worried about the couple's disappearance, Jerry ends up entering the farmhouse, lured by the sound of the gas generator. He gets killed by Leatherface when he is checking out the freezer and gets jump-scared by a nearly dead Pam. It is clear that Leatherface is distressed by the unwanted visits from strangers. With all of their friends gone, Sally and Franklin decide to go after Jerry and soon end up meeting Leatherface. As Franklin is wheelchair-bound, he is the first one to go, with a chainsaw through his chest. Sally, on the other hand, makes a beeline to the farmhouse, completely unaware that it belongs to the killer. But she soon finds out that something is wrong when she stumbles across two desiccated figures in the room upstairs. The woman is definitely dead, while the withered man is somewhat alive. When she gets cornered by Leatherface, she does the best final girl move ever and jumps out of the second floor window. She runs away, reaches the gas station, and asks for help from the owner of the place. But obviously, as it turns out, this man and the crazy hitchhiker are all related to the killer. The old man is grandpa, and the family members want him to kill her with a hammer. However, the feeble old man can't kill her, so the hitchhiker dude gets frustrated and tries to kill her himself. But our final girl manages to break free from the blinds and defenestrates herself. After yeeting herself out of the window for the second time, our final girl makes yet another run for safety as the dawn breaks. The hitchhiker and Leatherface follow her with a knife and chainsaw respectively. Eventually, the hitchhiker gets run over by a truck, and Sally manages to get on the back of a pickup truck. The movie ends with a harrowing sequence of Sally giggling maniacally on the back of the truck while Leatherface chases her and eventually gives up, flailing his chainsaw around in frustration. Leatherface and the Sawyer family as a whole are extremely unnerving to see in action, especially with how evident their sadistic nature is. But now, let's get to the meat of the video. Is Leatherface based on a real person? In short, the answer is yes. If you found the movie creepy, you're going to find this even creepier. While it is true that the movie starts off with an opening narration, which suggests that the entire movie is based on true events, there are only shreds of truth in it. See, there were a lot of shocking true crimes covered by the nationwide news cycle in post-war America. Tobe Hooper saw the arrest of Elmer Wayne Henley, and the sensationalization of this criminal and his crimes, along with the shock factor, gave Tobe the idea of a psychotic cannibalistic family portrayed in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. See, Elmer Wayne Henley had this weird moral conviction. When he took the stand, he said that he had committed crimes and now he would take it like a man. This struck Tobe Hooper and co-writer Kim Henkel as interesting. They wanted to portray this moral schizophrenia of committing crimes and then sort of taking the punishment with pride in the movie. While sure, Elmer played a bit of a role in the creation of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the main inspiration of this movie is Ed Gein, a serial killer from the 1950s whose crimes were so heinous, so grotesque, that he left the entire world shocked. Ed Gein, the body snatcher of Wisconsin, most commonly called the Plainfield Ghoul, had a long history of dressing up in feminine clothes and mutilating corpses. As a matter of fact, he was so obsessed with his mother that even after her death, Ed preserved her body in a room in pristine condition, wanting to crawl into her skin. He had desecrated several graves, and using those decaying bodies, he would make mementos, like masks and trinkets, which is obviously a clear inspiration for Jedediah's iconic mask. But why did he do it? Well, that story is a bit sad. See, Ed was born into a very religious family. His father George was abusive, and his mother Augusta was extremely religious and ensured Eddie and his brother Henry knew about God, sex, and the sin of lust. She kind of warned them on a daily basis about how they should stay away from women because they would surely drag them to hell. As George was an alcoholic, Augusta deemed him worthless. When she saved up enough money from her grocery business in La Crosse, she moved the entire family to Plainfield. Eddie was a bit introverted and was often ignored by everyone in school. His demeanor was extremely feminine in comparison to the boys of his age, and whenever Eddie tried to make friends, his mother would scold him for it. This pushed Eddie into the dark corners, and he became friends with those dark thoughts. The only woman in his life was his mother, and he worshipped her completely. He was not shy of throwing hands or tantrums if his brother criticized their mother even the slightest bit. In May of 1944, the boys were playing around a bushfire. Eventually, they split their ways, and Eddie returns home. When Henry did not return for a while, the police were called, and somehow Eddie managed to lead the investigators straight to Henry, who lay in an untouched area with bruises on his head. As Eddie was pretty shy and looked harmless, he was dismissed as a suspect. But we are all thinking the same thing, right? He probably did it. Now, a year later, in 1945, his mother passed away from health issues, and Eddie became even more distraught. His father had passed away 5 years ago, and now Eddie was all alone. After being alone for so long, craving a woman like his mother, Eddie started doing all the messed up things we know him for. And yes, he did wear human skin as a mask. Unlike Leatherface, who wore it to hide a skin condition, Gein did it to be a woman. In fact, he even wore his handmade vest with breasts and female genitalia on top of his body to complete the look. Now you might wonder, what about the chainsaw? Did Ed Gein murder people with a chainsaw? Is that why Leatherface uses that? Well, the inspiration for that comes directly from Tobe Hooper himself. While out on a shopping spree for Christmas, Tobe noticed a rack of chainsaws while being pushed and shoved around by this Christmas crowd. At that moment, the whole thought of plowing through the crowd using a chainsaw came into his head, and with the weapon of the killer picked out, it did not take him long to figure out the rest of the story. You can see how the day-to-day life actions of family members gathering for dinner, younger people getting frustrated frustrated with their grandparents for their slow mobility, etc., were integrated into the movie. With Ed Gein and our own daily life as the inspiration, Tobe Hooper definitely cooked up the most chilling story he could. What happened to the real person? Coming back to Ed, as it turns out, he was convicted in 1958 for killing a hardware store owner named Bernice Warden. The police found her headless corpse in 1957 in Gein's farmhouse. This led to an investigation, and upon entering the house, the authorities found several things that made it clear what a messed up person Gein was. There was a whole collection of skulls, along with furniture, clothes, and even a suit made of human skin and body parts. Gein told them that he went ahead and dug the bodies of recently dead women because he missed his mother. In total, the police found the remains of 10 women in his home. But, as he did not murder those women, Gein was only convicted of the murder of Bernice and Mary Hogan, another local woman. On the stand, Gein was declared mentally unfit, and he was sent to the state hospital in Wisconsin. A lot of people actually ended up in his house out of curiosity, and eventually, it was burned in 1958 by an arsonist. 10 years later, in 1968, Gein was considered to be sane enough to stand trial, and there he was found guilty and spent his entire life in a state facility. On the 26th of July, 1984, Edward Thomas Gein breathed his last in the Mendota Mental Health Institute after suffering a respiratory failure due to lung cancer. Several souvenir seekers chipped pieces of his gravestone from the Plainfield Cemetery, and in 2000, his headstone was stolen for good. The authorities were able to recover the headstone in 2001 from an area adjacent to Seattle, Washington, and it was then kept in the storage of the Waushara County Sheriff's Department. While there is no headstone now, everyone knows that Gein's body lies between his parents and his brother in the Plainfield Cemetery.
Just do your job, but never forget what he is.
Are there more characters inspired by Ed Gein? Would you be surprised to know that there are many more killers inspired by Ed Gein? Well, even if you are, he has indeed inspired quite a few. We have Norman Bates from 1960's Psycho, who is loosely based on Ed Gein. Robert Bloch wrote Norman Bates using Ed Gein as his inspiration, and with Alfred Hitchcock's adaptation, we all got to see him shine. The main traits that both of them share in their introverted, shy nature and desire for sex, but refusing it at the same time because of their domineering and religious mothers. And of course, the strange attachment to the mothers themselves as well. Then, in 1991, we had The Silence of the Lambs, where we got Buffalo Bill, who resembled Ed Gein the most. Ed Gein desired to be a woman, and Buffalo Bill did that too. Both of them parade around in their skin garments, and both chose women as their primary victims for the whole skinning and turning into fabric things. Unlike Bill, who chose younger women only, Gein leaned more towards women who were a bit older. Aside from these two memorable and recognizable villains, we also have Deranged from 1974, In the Light of the Moon in 2000, Ed Gein the Butcher of Plainfield in 2007, as well as Ed Gein the Musical of 2010, along with Rob Zombie's House of 1000 Corpses and The Devil's Rejects. All of them are based on Ed Gein, some word for word and others more loosely. And how can we forget Garland Green of Con Air and Oliver Thredson of American Horror Story Asylum were both inspired by Ed Gein as well. Marvelous Verdict. Unhinged Skinner, body snatcher, pop culture icon, whatever you want to call him, there is no denying the impact Ed Gein has had on us and the American pop culture as a whole. From true crime enthusiasts to horror film fans, we have all come across the Plainfield Ghoul, and in the end, we have immortalized him in our media and our hearts. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.